Kevin had spent the night reading about vitamins and natural medicine. He only knew the basics, but decided to use a recipe in one of the old books to make some herbal medications to help Officer Emmett recover. He offered her a reddish-brown pill that looked a little like the one Cook had given him. "What will it do?" she asked him. "I'm not exactly sure," he answered. Of course, he didn't want to tell her that he'd made it using simple ingredients he found in her kitchen. "You don't know? So what makes you think it can help me?" she said in an exasperated tone. "So are you going to take it or not?" Kevin was about to take the pill back as he spoke, but she snatched it out of his hand. Officer Emmett stared at the pill in her hand. She looked at Kevin and asked him, "You've already taken something like this, haven't you? That's how you got so strong." "If you're not going to take it, then I'd like to have it back," Kevin said. "Who said I don't want it?" She tossed the pill in her mouth and swallowed it with a gulp of water. They waited anxiously for about 5 minutes. Finally, Kevin asked her, "Do you feel anything?" "I feel like I'm going to be another 5 minutes late to work," she remarked. Then she asked him, "Are you sure you followed the recipe right?" "I'm not sure. The one I took was given to me by someone else," Kevin said awkwardly as he scratched his head. It was starting to look helpless. The book sounded serious, but maybe none of the things it talked about actually worked. Just then, Kevin's phone rang. He pulled it out of his pocket, looked at the caller ID, and said, "Lily?" "Where are you? Hurry up and come to Grandma's. My father's back from his trip." Lily's voice sounded a little urgent. "Okay, I'll be there in a little while." Kevin hung up the phone and picked up the 2 old books. Looking at Officer Emmett, he asked her, "Do you mind if I borrow these?" She nodded and said, "Knock yourself out." Then they said goodbye and he headed out the front door. He walked around the corner and found his car. While driving across town to the Jones mansion, Kevin thought about his father-in-law. Oliver Jones had been overseas for the past few years handling family business. Grandma Jones used to dote on Oliver, but after Lily married Kevin and Oliver went overseas, Grandma gradually stopped. For some reason, Kevin felt that it wasn't a good time for Oliver to return. After driving for more than an hour, he finally arrived at the Jones family's mansion. When he saw Kevin enter, Oliver, who was sitting on a big leather chair, waved at him. "Kevin, come here. Let me take a good look at you." "Dad," Kevin said as he walked over to him with a smile. "It's been a long time. You're looking stronger," Oliver said pleasantly. Jason, who was standing nearby, sneered. "He eats at home every day and doesn't do anything. He must have gotten fat." This remark brought laughter and snickering from most of the Joneses, all except Oliver, whose smile turned into a slight frown. Grandma Jones glared at Kevin, then said to her son, "Oliver, what brings you back after all this time?" "Mom, I found a great business opportunity for the family," Oliver explained as he stood up excitedly. That's when Kevin noticed how proud Dorothy looked as she sat next to her husband. Grandma Jones asked in surprise, "What opportunity?" "Mom, I met a very powerful businessman. All I have to do is send him the amount we agreed on, and half a month later he'll be able to triple our investment," Oliver said excitedly. The family members who were in the room started discussing this with each other. One of his cousins asked him, "Oliver, you chump, what were you thinking?" Some of the other comments were even worse, but Oliver didn't care what they said. He never lost his smile. He handed his phone to Grandma Jones and reassured her. "Mom, take a look. This is the transfer record between me and my friend." After Grandma Jones saw the financial report, she passed Oliver's phone around the room for everyone to see for themselves. The transfer record showed that as long as Oliver Jones invested a certain sum of money every time, he would receive 3 times that amount after 10 days. One of his nephews asked him, "Uncle Oliver, you aren't laundering money or something, are you?" But everyone knew he was an honest man, and the accounts looked genuine. Grandma Jones slapped the table next to her. "Oliver, it's not that I don't trust you, but our family's business isn't doing that well right now. The most I could give you is $90 million. As you know, it would be wise to watch this investment over time. I think we should be more patient, Grandma Jones said hesitantly. Mom, this friend of mine is doing development overseas. He's focusing on some real cutting-edge industries. I guarantee that we'll earn a lot of money from this, he said confidently. Then he added, if we hesitate, he may look for a new partner. It would be a shame for us to miss out on such a fantastic opportunity. Kevin stood up and said, Dad, I think you should go and check on your friend. Dorothy immediately reprimanded Kevin. What are you talking about? How can you interrupt your dad when he's speaking? If you don't understand what we're talking about, just sit there with your mouth shut. Dorothy still couldn't bear to look at Kevin, and she was disappointed that Lily refused to divorce him. Mom, I'm telling the truth, and Dad didn't say exactly what his friend would do with the money. If we invest everything we have, we stand to lose a lot, Kevin explained very seriously. As usual, the rest of the Jones family started criticizing him one after another, saying things like, just go home, you don't belong here, and you don't know what you're talking about. Then Lily whispered to Kevin, Stop it, Kevin. Dad's finally home again. What if you make him angry? Lily, what do you think of Dad's deal with his friend? Kevin asked gravely. Of course I don't believe it, Kevin, but we need to support him, Lily pleaded. She didn't know what else to say. And she really didn't believe that anyone would offer her father such a good investment, even his best friend. It had to be a scam. But she just couldn't get herself to disagree with him, especially in front of the entire family. Grandma Jones didn't pay any attention to Kevin's objections. Her eyes lit up and she stared at Oliver and thought about all the money they could make. Grandma Jones finally let out a breath as if she had made up her mind and said, Oliver, why don't we invest $5 million first? Mom, what are you talking about? We aren't some tiny little unknown family. We're one of the most respected families in all of Chicago. If I only invest $5 million, my friend will think that we're not committed, Oliver implored. He put our family at the top of his list because of our reputation. If we don't show the same faith in him, we may lose the entire deal. They all agreed with him. Nobody wanted to risk being passed over because they were being stingy. They had to commit more than $5 million. Then how much do you think our family should invest in this opportunity? Grandma Jones asked him. Oliver heard her and immediately became excited. Mom, I think we should invest more. We should invest all available funds. Then once we've made enough profit, we can pull back. When Oliver said this, none of the Joneses knew what to do. Even Grandma Jones was uncertain. Grandma, please don't listen to Uncle Oliver. Matilda was the first to stand up and voice her opinion. We're not even the richest family in Chicago, let alone the world. There's no way someone would approach us first. This has to be a scam. Oliver got upset with his niece and yelled, Matilda, I'm talking with your grandmother. Please don't interrupt. Even though Oliver used to be one of the most respected members of the family, he was no longer Grandma Jones's favorite. A lot of the Joneses held a grudge against him. For one thing, they thought his son-in-law Kevin was a deadbeat. They also had a lot of unpleasant things to say about Dorothy and Lily lately. And to top it all off, Oliver had been out of the country for years. I don't care what you think. This is a scam, Matilda protested. Then Kevin repeated his warning. Dad, in my opinion, you really ought to think twice about this. When she heard this, Dorothy stood up from her seat, walked over to Kevin, and slapped him in the face. What are you talking about? Don't you want this family to succeed? Just because you're a leech, it doesn't mean Lily's father is too. If you say another word, you will never be welcome in my home again, she shrieked. Kevin couldn't let it go, even after Dorothy's ultimatum. But Mom, think about it. This is too good to be true. If it were this easy to make a fortune, nobody in the world would be poor. Dorothy gave Kevin a vicious slap on the other cheek, shouting, That's it! Get out of here now! Before Kevin could say anything else, Matilda interrupted him. Uncle Oliver, you didn't come back home just to let the family get cheated out of millions, did you? Suddenly, Jason had an idea. The way he saw the situation, Oliver's friend claimed he could triple their money in 10 days. Did he think that they were fools? Of course it would be easy to trick Grandma Jones out of her money. And at first Jason wanted to speak out against the idea like Matilda had. But now he saw an opportunity to chase Lily out of the family and make some extra money for himself. Plus, Oliver was Kevin's father-in-law, and Jason hated Kevin to the core because of all the times he'd made him suffer. He couldn't pass up this chance to get even. So Jason sneered and said, "Matilda, Uncle Oliver has good intentions. How can you say his friend's offer is a fraud?" "Jason, what do you mean?" Grandma Jones said as she turned to look at him. Even though Jason had humiliated Brittany and almost cost the family a fortune, he was still Grandma's favorite. "Grandma, I think this is a good opportunity," Jason said respectfully. He had already come up with a plan. As long as Grandma listened to Oliver and invested the family's money, Jason would be able to funnel company money to his own bank account. This deal his uncle had found was definitely a scam. By the time the family realized all their funds had disappeared, it would look like Oliver was responsible. He and the rest of his immediate family, including Kevin, would be ostracized. Jason figured that nobody would suspect them. Then, once Kevin and Lily were out of the family, he would pay someone to track them down and punish them so he could finally get his revenge. "Jason, have you lost it? Can't you tell this is an obvious scam?" Matilda asked in disbelief. Kevin was about to say something, but Dorothy glared at him angrily, and Lily pulled on his sleeve. He decided to keep quiet for now. "Matilda, I think maybe you've lost it. You actually agree with Kevin?" Jason asked in a snotty tone. He continued, "I don't care what Kevin thinks. He doesn't know anything about business. But you're a Jones. You ought to know better." "It's because I'm a Jones that I'm against this." Matilda shot back angrily. "Matilda, what do you have against me?" Oliver said dejectedly. Matilda was about to say more, but Grandma Jones suddenly slammed her fist on the table. She first gave Kevin a fierce look and then said, "Enough! We're all family. What are you guys arguing about anyway? You sound ridiculous." Grandma Jones looked at Kevin again and her eyes were filled with contempt. What was she going to do now? While everyone watched anxiously, Grandma Jones took a deep breath and said, "I've decided to give all available family assets to Oliver for this investment." "Grandma," Matilda began to plead, but her grandmother interrupted her. "Don't say another word. Matilda, you must remember one thing. Above all else, you're a Jones." Oliver was the most excited one in the room. "Mother, don't worry. We'll easily earn at least $200 million, Oliver said happily. The next step was for Grandma to authorize the Jones family's chief financial officer to transfer every available asset to Oliver's account. As this was happening, Jason looked at his smartphone and smiled. Meanwhile, Kevin closed his eyes and shook his head helplessly. Soon afterward, everyone left the mansion. Lily pulled on Kevin's sleeve as soon as they stepped out of the building and said, "Kevin, do you have any free time now? Let's go home and have a meal with Mom and Dad." "Of course I have time, Lily," Kevin smiled and said. "Wait with them here while I go get the car." "Your boss let you drive his car again?" Lily asked in surprise. She didn't understand. What kind of boss would let his employee drive his own car around all day long? "Of course. My boss thinks a lot of me. You should see the one he let me drive today," Kevin said over his shoulder as he walked towards his car. Oliver came over and stood next to Lily. He watched Kevin open the door of a Porsche Panamera and his eyes grew wide. He commented, "Kevin isn't doing too bad, is he? Just look at that car." "That's his boss's car," Dorothy said with contempt. "He could never afford such a nice sedan." "He has an interesting boss. Where exactly does Kevin work?" Oliver asked suspiciously. Just then, Kevin pulled up in front of the three of them and greeted them warmly. They all got in and sank into the plush seats of the sports sedan. While pulling out of the mansion's gates, Kevin asked Oliver, "Dad, How long do you plan to stay this time?" "Your dad just got here and you're already talking about him leaving?" Dorothy said coldly. "You've got no common sense." Kevin didn't say anything else. He just focused on driving the car. Lily let out a light sigh. She knew that Kevin would never be able to change Dorothy's opinion of him, no matter what he did. When they reached home, Kevin sat down on the sofa. Dorothy glared at him and said, "Why are you just sitting there? Are you waiting for me to bring you your food? Why don't you go to the kitchen where you belong?" Kevin got up and walked into the kitchen. "All right, Dorothy, let's stop talking about Kevin," Oliver groaned. "I'm really tired of him. What's wrong with chewing him out now and then?" Dorothy complained. "You don't know how it's been for the past 3 years. He doesn't do anything around here. Just a good-for-nothing freeloader." "All right now, that's all in the past," Oliver said as he looked toward the kitchen to see if his son-in-law was in earshot. When he saw that Kevin wasn't going to come out, Oliver turned to his daughter and said, "Lily, I came back home to give my family a chance to make a fortune, but I'm also here to talk about your marriage." "What do you mean, Dad?" Lily asked with a puzzled look on her face. Oliver said sweetly, "Lily, I met a very rich man while I was overseas. His son has been investing in Chicago for the past few years, which is a wonderful opportunity for us. If you want, I can arrange for the two of you to meet." As it turned out, Oliver didn't really like Kevin after all. He was embarrassed that his son-in-law had a reputation as such a loafer. "Dad, what are you talking about? I'm already married to Kevin," Lily replied. But she knew what her father was getting at. "Couldn't you get a divorce?" Oliver asked very seriously. "My friend's son is young and he has a very promising career. Best of all, he doesn't have a girlfriend yet. You could marry him and then we could all move to Europe." Dorothy was excited to hear this and asked her husband, "Are you serious?" "Of course. Over the past few years, I haven't had much financial success, but I made a lot of trustworthy friends," Oliver said slowly. "When the time comes, we can move overseas where I can keep you safe." Before Dorothy could say anything, Lily stood up and said firmly, "Dad, I'm definitely not going to divorce Kevin." "Why are you shouting?" Dorothy said as she jumped up from the sofa. "Tell me, what good qualities does he have? He's useless and annoying, and he doesn't understand anything about the business world. Today, right in front of the whole family, he actually dared to question your father. He simply has no respect for us." "Mom, Kevin is just looking out for the family's interests," Lily replied. It made her anxious to say it, but she just had to. "Actually, I don't believe Dad's investment is a good idea. It's just that I didn't say it out loud in front of everyone. Listen, Mom, Kevin has already made a lot of positive changes. He's even found a good job. Please don't look down on him." "So what if he has a good job?" Dorothy forcefully interrupted Lily as she spoke. "He's never going to do anything with his life, and I'm tired of waiting." "Lily, you've got to listen to my advice and divorce Kevin," Oliver insisted. No matter what you say, I won't divorce Kevin," Lily protested. "What's wrong with you?" Dorothy said angrily. "Why don't you want a divorce? Don't you think I'd like to kick him out the door right now?" "If he leaves, I'm leaving too," Lily said courageously. Suddenly, Oliver slammed his fist on the table. He had lost his patience. "Enough! I'm the head of this family and I'll settle this right now. Tomorrow you're going to divorce Kevin, and the day after tomorrow you'll meet my friend's son. After that, I'll handle the paperwork for all of us to move to Europe." Kevin, who was cutting vegetables in the kitchen, could hear every word of the conversation. He was surprised to see Lily shove open the kitchen door and walk toward him. She grabbed Kevin's hand and turned around to walk out of the room. As she did this, she shouted at her parents, "When you change your mind, I'll come back with Kevin." "If you're with him, don't bother to come back," Dorothy yelled as she angrily picked up her coffee mug and threw it across the room. Oliver sighed bitterly and said, "How senseless." Lily held Kevin's hand tightly. They kept walking until they were around the corner from her parents' house. When they reached the bus stop, Lily let go of Kevin's hand, sat down on the bench, and cried. Kevin looked at Lily. He had mixed feelings about what was happening. After sitting quietly with her for a long time, he asked softly, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Lily slowly raised her head, wiped the tears from her cheeks, and whispered, "Kevin, I won't give up on you if you don't give up on me." When Kevin heard her say this, he took a deep breath. It made him so happy. He never imagined that Lily would have such a big fight with her parents over him. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. A few minutes later, Lily stood up and looked at Kevin. She said, "Go get the car. We'll go to your place tonight." Kevin looked into Lily's eyes and asked her, "You're really not going back?" "I said that I'll only go back if they change their mind," she explained. Kevin could see that she had made up her mind. Kevin nodded in agreement, turned around, and walked around the corner to get his car. When he opened the door to let Lily in, he asked her, "Are you certain you really want to go to my place? I just want to be sure you are prepared for it." As Kevin started to drive towards Corwin Tower, he was racking his brains trying to figure out how to explain everything to Lily. He had told her that his job included room and board, but he'd only said that to buy some time. If she went to Corwin Tower with him, wouldn't she figure out his secret? He wasn't ready for that. "I'll have to play it by ear," Kevin said to himself. "Why don't you want me to see your apartment? Do you have a mistress already?" Lily asked him. "Lily, that hurts. You should know me better than that," he said with a sigh. "I just hope you like the place." "No matter how dirty and messy your apartment is, it'll be your job to clean it up." After Lily said this, she leaned back in her seat and fell asleep. It had been an exhausting day. Kevin turned the Porsche onto Lakeshore Drive and headed downtown. Every now and then, he took his eyes off the road to look at Lily. Finally, Kevin made up his mind and thought to himself, "Lily, don't worry. As long as you're faithful to me, I'll be faithful to you, no matter what." About a half hour later, Lily slowly opened her eyes. She took one look out the car window and her jaw dropped. "Kevin, where are we? Didn't I ask you to take me to your place?" "Lily, this is where I live," Kevin said as he pointed to the entrance of the luxury tower. "The apartment your boss gave you?" Lily turned her head and looked at Kevin in shock. Kevin knew he had to tell the truth. As he was driving to the Corwin Tower, this was the only solution that he could think of that would work. If he told Lily a lie today, then from now on he would have to tell her countless more lies. So he decided not to hide it anymore. "Lily, if I told you that I bought this place as a gift for you, would you believe me?" Kevin asked her earnestly. Lily didn't know what to say. She began to explain, "I don't." Before she could finish, Kevin interrupted. "You were there the day I bought it." Lily immediately remembered and asked him, "Was it the day you and Garrett had that fight?" She recalled asking Kevin where he'd gotten the black card, but Garrett was being a real bastard, so Kevin never had a chance to explain it to her. However, Lily had always thought that Kevin bought the condo for his boss, not for himself, and especially not for her. "Yes, it was that day," Kevin nodded. After saying this, Kevin got out of the car and walked around to open the door for Lily. After the valet took the Panamera down to the building's garage, Kevin took Lily by the arm and they walked into Corwin Tower together. As she looked up at the beautiful Neo-Art Deco entrance hall, he asked her, "Well, what do you think?" Lily didn't answer Kevin's question. Instead, she hung onto his arm tightly. "Kevin, this is your boss's place, right? Is it okay for us to even be here?" Lily asked nervously. She started to worry that they would get in trouble. "Kevin," she said anxiously, "I know you're trying to impress me, but what we're doing is against the law. We have to get out of here. No matter how bad your apartment is, I won't be upset. Let's walk over to your place." Kevin didn't know what to say. He could tell Lily was terrified. "Call your boss to apologize and then we'll go to your apartment," she pleaded. She didn't know who Kevin's boss was, but she was sure that someone who could afford a place in Corwin Tower had to be very important. Kevin smiled and reassured her. "Don't be nervous. I really do live here." Then he patted Lily's hand gently to comfort her as he walked her over to the private penthouse elevator. "Kevin, please don't lie to me anymore." Lily wept. Her eyes swept around the magnificent room, then she lowered her head and said softly, "We can't possibly afford to live in a place like this." "Why don't you believe me? I swear I really live here." Kevin pulled out his key card and swiped it for the elevator. He gently took Lily's arm and stepped in with her. As the elevator rose to the top floor, he suddenly had an idea. "Lily," he explained, "I helped the company sign a business deal worth billions. My boss was so happy he gave me an enormous bonus. So I bought this condo." "Are you serious? You're really not lying to me." Lily looked at Kevin and he could tell that she'd still had her doubts. As the door opened and they stepped into the living room, he said, "We've been married for almost 3 years. Have I ever lied to you?" Lily dried her eyes and looked around the lavishly decorated living room with the floor-to-ceiling view of Chicago's skyline and Grant Park. It was true that he'd never lied to her. When she thought about it, since she had watched Kevin buy the place, she knew that it was worth $8 million. If Kevin really helped the company sign a billion-dollar business deal, it was definitely possible for his boss to give him at least that much. "So, then you really did buy this place?" she confirmed. "Of course. For you. For us," Kevin said with a smile. When Lily heard this, she broke into a wide grin and pulled Kevin to the window to look out on the city. "Kevin, I'm going to call my mother right now and tell her you bought the nicest condo in Chicago," Lily said excitedly. But Kevin wasn't sure that would be a good idea. "When Mom and Dad find out you own a place like this, they'll definitely change their opinion of you," Lily exclaimed as she hugged Kevin tightly and gave him a kiss. "I think we should wait a while, Lily," Kevin replied. He thought for a moment and said, "You just had a knockdown drag-out with your parents. If you tell them now, they'll just think that I borrowed it from my friends." Lily got a sad look in her eyes when he said this. "I guess that makes sense," she said. "I just don't know why they hate you so much." "It doesn't matter right now. As long as I'm willing to work hard, one day your parents will come around and accept me," Kevin said as he reached out and ran his fingers through Lily's hair. Just then, Kevin's phone vibrated in his pocket. He took a look at the caller ID and saw that it was Cook. While Lily explored the condo, Kevin sat down and answered the call. "Mitch, what's going on?"
"Kevin, do you have any free time this evening?" Cook asked him.
"Sure. What's up?" Kevin asked curiously.
"It's Adriana's birthday tonight. She's having a party at my hotel and she asked me to invite you," Cook explained.
"Okay, no problem." Kevin thought for a second and then added, "And you don't need to send anyone to pick me up." After he hung up, Kevin looked over at Lily, who was standing on the stairs and gazing up at the top floor. The apartment was like something you only saw in an architecture magazine. Kevin decided not to take Lily with him to the party. He didn't want to risk having her find out the rest of his secret. Not right now. "Lily, I've got something to do and I need to head out. I might be back pretty late," Kevin told her. "No problem. You go ahead and do your work," she replied. Lily felt that Kevin's boss was really going to help him on his meteoric rise to the top, and she didn't want to get in the way. With his boss's help, he could finally be accepted by the Jones family. "Great. If you need anything, just use the intercom over there. The concierge in the lobby can get you whatever you need. I'll give you a tour when I get back," he explained. Then he got in the elevator to head down to the valet to pick up his car. Kevin stopped at an upscale mall along the way to buy Adriana a sparkling diamond necklace. Of course, it wasn't expensive for Adriana, but he wanted to give her a little something as a token of his appreciation. Then he headed to the Whistler Hotel. When he got out of his car, Drake held the door and gave him a warm greeting.
"Mr. Williams, what a pleasant surprise. Mr. Cook asked me to wait for you here."
This was quite a contrast from the nasty threats that Drake had made when they first met. But Mitch had straightened him out, and now he treated Kevin with far more respect. Kevin smiled and said, "It's good to see you, Drake. I hope you've been staying out of trouble."
"I'm at your service, Mr. Williams," he replied. "The party is just getting started. Mr. Cook will join you soon."
Drake stepped aside and gestured for Kevin to head inside. "Where's Adriana?" Kevin inquired.
President Wright is getting ready upstairs. She wants to be presentable when she greets all the VIPs, Drake said with a smile.
When Kevin entered the banquet hall, he saw that, even though it was still pretty early, a lot of guests had already arrived. That made sense. The West Chicago International Group was one of the leading corporations in the Midwest. There was a table in the corner covered with neatly arranged gifts. Kevin reached out to put the necklace on the pile, and he was interrupted by one of the hotel staff. "Hello, sir. Please follow me after you finish. We're asking all the bodyguards to move to a private room," the employee said politely. Before Kevin could say anything, Drake got a furious look on his face and asked him,
"Who said this gentleman was a bodyguard?"
"Sir, I don't know," he said to Drake in an apologetic tone. Mitchell Cook was the most respected person in the Whistler Hotel, but Drake was close behind. Still, even though Drake had the same last name, the only Mr. Cook at the hotel was Mitchell Cook. But Drake didn't know anything about managing a hotel. His specialty was dealing with anyone who dared to commit a crime on the property, and he was known for his cruel methods.
"Why are you apologizing to me? You should be apologizing to Mr. Williams," Drake berated him.
The young man had noticed Kevin earlier, but saw how simply he was dressed and assumed he was just some big shot's bodyguard dropping off a birthday present. He'd worked at the Whistler Hotel for 2 years, but had never made a blunder like this.
"Well, what are you waiting for?" Drake scolded him again.
"I'm sorry, Mr. Williams. Please accept my apologies," he stammered. "No problem. I get that a lot," Kevin said casually.
"Isn't it time for you to return to your station?" Drake said with a glare.
Just then they heard someone call out for help. "Please call a doctor. President Archer just fainted." The guests formed a circle around the woman and began to discuss what they should do. Drake squeezed through the crowd and saw her lying on the floor. He furrowed his brow and said,
"President Archer?"
"Do you know her?" Kevin asked hesitantly as his eyes were scanning the surroundings. It seemed as if he was looking for something.
"Mr. Williams, you might not know this, but her name is Gwen Archer. She's the CEO of Gwendom Real Estate, the biggest agency in Chicago."
Drake explained quickly as he tried to see how he could help.
"Her brother, Dominic Archer, is the head of one of the largest crime syndicates in the city."
Suddenly, someone in the crowd raised their voice. "Is there a doctor here? Please come and take a look at President Archer." "I'm a doctor. Please let me in," said a tall woman as she made her way through the crowd.
"Dr. Willow?"
Drake's face lit up as he said,
"Sorry to trouble you. Please have a look at President Archer."
Gwen Archer had been personally invited by Adriana. If anything happened to her, the hotel and West Chicago group would have a lot to explain to Gwendom Real Estate. Everyone was surprised to see Dr. Serafina Willow rendering aid. She was famous, not just in Chicago, as the medical director of Downtown General. She probably had the best medical reputation in the entire city. Dr. Willow didn't pay any attention to what the guests were saying. Her focus right now was Gwen Archer. She asked one of her companions to get her medical bag and then knelt down to start taking the poor woman's vitals so she could assess the situation. A few minutes later, Adriana arrived with a few of her bodyguards. "Dr. Willow, how is she doing?" Adriana asked with concern. "The lack of ventilation isn't helping. Please ask everyone to step back and give her some space," she replied with a solemn expression. When Adriana heard this, she immediately motioned for everyone to give them some room. Kevin, who was standing next to Drake, watched this intently. It reminded him of something he'd just read in one of the books on natural medicine. Gwen still wasn't responding, and everyone began to whisper to each other. Was it food poisoning? Did she have some kind of medical condition? They didn't want to say anything out loud because they were afraid of her brother Dominic. Drake walked up and asked her,
"Dr. Willow, has there been any improvement?"
The doctor seemed a bit embarrassed. She said, "I think we should transport her to the hospital for testing. All I can do is stabilize her." Adriana nodded and asked Drake to send for a car. It would be faster than an ambulance and the doctor could ride with her. Suddenly, Kevin walked up and put his arm on Drake's shoulder, saying, There's no need to run any tests on her. Some of the onlookers recognized Kevin as the deadbeat who had married his way into the Jones family. They figured he was just trying to get attention and look important. As they were making the usual nasty comments inspired by the lies that Jason had been spreading about Kevin, their chatter immediately stopped when they saw Adriana walk up to Kevin and say, "Mr. Williams." The entire hall immediately fell silent. "Happy birthday, Adriana," Kevin exclaimed as he smiled and handed her the present that he hadn't gotten a chance to put on the table. "Thank you, Mr. Williams," Adriana answered as she smiled and accepted the gift. Drake interrupted politely to ask him,
"Mr. Williams, why don't you let me send President Archer to the hospital?"
"Are you a doctor?" Adriana asked in confusion. Kevin shook his head and simply replied, "No." "So if you've never studied medicine, why are you questioning my decision?" Dr. Willow asked abruptly. She was a little irked by this. Actually, Dr. Willow wasn't sure herself that Gwen needed to go to the hospital. She couldn't find any reason for her not to be waking up yet, so she assumed that some tests might help to solve the mystery. "I'm not questioning your medical skills. It seems to me that her condition is unique and the hospital won't be able to do any more than we can right here," Kevin said politely. The doctor ignored Kevin and turned to look at Adriana. "President Wright, are you going to put up with this young man's nonsense?" Some of the onlookers started to mumble again. They were curious to see how this would turn out. "Dr. Willow, I would trust this man with my very life," Adriana said firmly. The doctor wasn't sure how to respond. She just looked at Adriana in disbelief. But she probably wouldn't leave the party. She had pressed for an invitation just so that she could make friends with Adriana. "So, Mr. Williams, what do you think we should do?" Adriana asked Kevin. Kevin looked around the room and then pointed to the scented candles that were burning on all of the tables and the centerpieces. "Drake, please carry President Archer to the table by the window over there and open it wide. Then have your assistants put out all those candles and take them into the kitchen." Drake hesitated a little at this odd request, but after seeing Adriana nod her head, he ordered everyone to do exactly as Kevin had said. "Mr. Williams, can you please explain why you want to do this?" Adriana asked with a puzzled look on her face. "Of course," Kevin smiled and said. "I noticed the candles when I walked in. They give a nice atmosphere, but I'm certain that President Archer is sensitive to some of the ingredients that are used to produce the strong fragrance. I recognize one of the smells as something that is used in herbal medicine to lower blood pressure. She doesn't need any expensive tests, just some fresh air." They all watched to see if Gwen was showing any improvement. After Gwen Archer passed out, Kevin suggested that they move her to a table by the window and then open it wide. Next, he had them blow out all the centerpiece candles and take them into the kitchen. Adriana and the others still had their doubts, but they were hopeful that this would help. Otherwise, they would have to rush Gwen to the hospital. Some of them whispered rudely to each other because they thought Kevin had no idea what he was talking about. From what Jason Jones had said, Kevin was a complete failure in everything that he tried. Drake overheard some of them who were standing nearby, and he was less than pleased. He turned around and roared angrily, "Whoever makes the next snide remark about Mr. Williams is going to take a swim in the Chicago River." That certainly wiped the smirks off their faces. But Adriana still didn't understand. "Mr. Williams, could you please explain again why you had President Archer taken over to the window?" "It's very simple," he explained. "President Archer had a reaction to one of the ingredients in the scented candles. I can smell an herb that can lower blood pressure. She's obviously more sensitive to it than anyone else here. I'm not sure exactly why, though." Dr. Willow still wasn't convinced. There didn't seem to be any scientific basis to what he was saying. "President Wright, in my medical opinion, you'll need to transport this woman to an emergency room immediately," Dr. Willow said with a serious expression. Just then, a group of guests walked into the room led by a tall, powerful-looking man.
"Please step aside,"
Dominic Archer ordered the crowd. The guests respectively made way for him.
"Who put my sister on this table?" he bellowed.
Mr. Archer, please don't worry. I can explain this, Adriana said calmly. There wasn't a trace of fear in her voice.
President Wright, I don't need an explanation. I just want to know why my sister isn't on her way to the hospital. What are you trying to pull here? Dominic asked sternly.
The onlookers started to throw Kevin straight under the bus.
It's his fault, one of them blurted out. He's that useless son-in-law who's been leeching off the Jones family for years.
Jones family? Which Jones family? Dominic asked. Then his eyes lit up when he remembered what he'd heard about Kevin. He looked at him and snarled.
Are you responsible for this? Dominic, I'm warning you. You need to show more respect to Mr. Williams,
Drake said as he stepped between Dominic and Kevin. Dominic and Drake had always been rivals in Chicago's underworld, but the two of them had always kept their conflicts quiet. They'd never battled face to face. Not yet.
Drake? Since when do you stand up for such a useless piece of crap?
Dominic asked him. Drake, please let me handle this. I can explain it to him. Kevin pleaded as he stepped forward to try and convince the large man that this was the best course of action.
Please be careful what you say to him. He admires strength most of all.
It may be useless to try and reason with him, Drake said to Kevin quietly. Drake and Dominic had been in competition for years, and he was a good judge of the man's character. But if Kevin was injured under Drake's protection, Cook would never forgive him.
So, what do you have to say, you son of a bitch?
Dominic asked nastily as he looked at his sister Gwen lying on the banquet hall table. Drake started to reply, but he was interrupted by Kevin. Your sister is fine. Her blood pressure dropped for a while, but I can guarantee that she'll be up and back on her feet in less than 5 minutes.
If she's not, I promise I won't let you leave this hotel in one piece, Dominic threatened him.
Then he glared at Adriana and added,
President Wright, you'll have some explaining to do too. Dominic, how dare you take on that rude tone of voice with my friends?
Drake said arrogantly. Nobody dared to step between the two of them to interfere. Just when it looked like the two of them were about to start swinging at each other, Gwen suddenly coughed. They were all amazed that Kevin had been right, especially the ones who had been swayed by Jason's gossip about him. Dominic grunted at Kevin and Drake. Then he quickly walked over to his sister and asked her,
Gwen, how do you feel? Are you okay?
Dominic, when did you get here? Gwen shook her head slightly before continuing. It felt like the room was spinning and then everything went dark. Her voice was still faint, but everyone could hear her clearly. Most of them still didn't believe Kevin was right. Dominic frowned a little and looked at Kevin. President Archer, think about this carefully. Did you see anything before you fainted? Kevin asked her.
Stop pretending to know what happened. My sister woke up all by herself. This has nothing to do with your nonsense,
Dominic shouted indignantly. A lot of the guests who were watching this nodded their heads in agreement. They also thought that Gwen waking up right now was just a coincidence. Gwen thought for a moment and then slowly opened her mouth to reply. Now that you mention it, just before I passed out, I was starting to have a hard time breathing. There was a strange smell in the air and I just couldn't seem to breathe. I took the candle from the table and smelled it to see if that was where it was coming from. Suddenly, everyone felt extremely awkward. How could they all have been so wrong? But somehow a few of them still blame Kevin and the Jones family. That makes sense, Kevin explained. The candles were made with some ingredients that are used in herbal remedies to lower blood pressure. I asked one of the waiters to bring me one of the boxes from the kitchen. He pulled one of the candles out of the box and smelled it, as he explained. This has been made with a powerful combination of ingredients. Usually scented candles can be pretty safe with enough air circulation, but these look like they're homemade. He handed one of the candles to Dr. Willow to examine. Dr. Willow took the candle and checked it out for herself. Then she nodded her head. Based on this slightly more scientific explanation, she was a little embarrassed for having been so rude to Kevin earlier. With Dominic's help, Gwen slowly got down from the table and walked over to Kevin. She was still confused and asked him, There are so many people in this room. Why am I the only one who fainted? Some of the guests were wondering the same thing.
Lots of them had been in the room for at least an hour. A couple of them had even leaned down to inhale the fragrance of the candles. Kevin reflected for a moment, trying to recall what he had read. Then he looked at Gwen and speculated. President Archer, I've learned that in high concentrations for someone who's sensitive, the effect can be very serious. What the hell are you talking about? Dominic interrupted. Kevin sighed. President Archer, it's probably just a bit of susceptibility you have. All right, that's enough. Dominic couldn't hold it in any longer. He gestured for his bodyguards to come over. A second later, Kevin was surrounded. Drake stepped forward to put himself between Kevin and the men. All of you stop, Gwen snapped. I think he's right about this. I've always been kind of sensitive about some things. Remember when we were kids? She looked into her brother's eyes. The explanation seemed to make sense to Dominic, but he would never apologize to Kevin in front of everyone. It wasn't in his nature. Instead, he asked someone to put the gift that he'd brought for Adriana on the table in the corner. Then he helped his sister walk out of the hotel. Mr. Williams, that was very interesting. Have you been studying the subject for very long? Adriana's eyes were full of admiration. I just happened to be studying New Age medicine recently. I'm nowhere near an expert. Kevin smiled and added, Please go mingle with your guests. This is your evening. Okay, Mr. Williams, Adriana agreed. Then she leaned in and told him, There's a private room upstairs for a small group of us. Cook should be up there in a little while. Why don't you make your way up there and I'll join you later? Okay, I'll head up there with Drake, Kevin said enthusiastically. About 15 or 20 minutes later, Cook arrived at the hotel and, after checking on things at the party, he went upstairs to join his friends. Gilbert Rhodes and Emo Squire showed up too. They all spent a lot of time catching up. Finally, after all the guests had left the banquet hall, Adriana joined her friends and they all chatted until early in the morning. That night, because Kevin was tired from such a long day, and because he had drunk a little too much to be safe on the road, he spent the rest of the night at the hotel. Early the next morning, right after he woke up, Kevin got a call from Lily. Hi, Lily. Are you doing okay? Kevin, please come home quickly. I need a ride to Grandma's place. Lily sounded very anxious. What's the matter? Kevin immediately realized something bad had happened. My dad's friend disappeared right after he got all the money, so now... Her voice trailed off. Then she said, You should take care of your business first. I'll take a taxi there myself. Then Lily hung up the phone in a hurry. Kevin was sure he knew what had happened. When Oliver told them all about the investment, he and Matilda had been against it. But the rest of the members of the Jones family were only thinking about how much money they could make in this get-rich-quick scheme. Nobody was willing to listen to reason. Just as Kevin was thinking about how pleasing it would be to see the Jones family suffer a little, he thought of another problem. Since this whole idea had been suggested by Oliver, Lily might suffer from the backlash. Kevin said to himself, Lily, I'm only helping the Jones family because of you. This is definitely the first and last time. Then he took out his phone and made a call to his old friend Tyler Dawn. Mr. Williams, it's wonderful to hear from you again. I was beginning to think that something had happened to you. Hearing his colleague's playful tone, Kevin couldn't help breaking into a grin. Don't be ridiculous, Kevin told him. Tyler, I need your help with something. What? You need my help again? His friend answered mischievously. Seriously, what can I do for you, Kevin? I want you to contact the Jones family in Chicago and discuss a partnership. But I want you to do it using the KWTD Corporation's name, not mine. Several years ago, Kevin invested a large sum of money with his friend Tyler, and they formed a company called the KWTD Corporation. They were in a hurry, so they didn't have time to research a good corporate name. They just used their initials. At first, the company only did import and export business, but over the past 6 years, Tyler had built KWTD into one of the top companies in the country. And it was definitely the top import-export company. However, the real boss of KWTD had always been Kevin. Other than him and Tyler, no one else knew about it. It was important for Kevin to hold on to the company. so he was careful not to mention it to anyone when he was driven out of his family. That's how much he cared about Lily.
Okay, Kevin, I'll get on that right away. It just so happens that I've been working on a project in Chicago lately, so it'll be no problem for me to drop in on the Jones family personally.
They discussed a few more details before hanging up. Kevin couldn't help wondering how the Jones family would react if they found out that he was behind all of this. While Kevin was setting up the deal with Tyler, all the Joneses were rushing to the family mansion. Grandma Jones was sitting in the big chair in the middle of the room looking despondent. Oliver was standing in front of everybody looking fearful and very ashamed.
"So, Oliver, where did your friend go?"
Grandma Jones asked him sharply. Usually the Joneses would mutter to each other, but they were beside themselves this time. One of his cousins shouted, "Where's all the money you promised?" Another one yelled, "Unbelievable! You lost everything in just one night." The crowd looked like they wanted to eat him alive. "Please don't worry," Lily said in a panic. "My dad has already called the police. They'll track him down soon." Dorothy anxiously tried to appeal to them, saying, "We're all family. Let's talk about this peacefully. As long as we find him, we'll get our money back." But their pleas fell on deaf ears. The family was too furious with Oliver right now. Grandma Jones gave Oliver a sad look and said, "You've really disappointed me." The discussion turned to the next step they would take. Having lost all their liquid assets, the family was on the brink of ruin. And it was so much money, over $100 million, that there was no way Oliver could ever pay them back by himself. It looked hopeless. If Grandma Jones hadn't been in the room, they might have gotten violent.
"Mom, I really had no idea it would turn out like this. I transferred the money to my friend last night, but I couldn't contact him this morning," Oliver explained.
Of course, Oliver had been fooled, but the family didn't believe his explanation. As they became more and more emotional, a few of them started rolling up their sleeves. They looked like they wanted to take a swing at Oliver, whether Grandma was there or not. Just then, everyone turned to the entrance as it was announced that Bella Ortez and Eugene Kim had arrived. They were financial partners with the Jones family. There were also some Jones Enterprise clients who wanted to speak with them. This was too important, so they all came straight to the mansion instead of waiting to meet in the corporate office. Before anyone could react, the large group entered the Jones mansion's main hall, where it was obvious that Oliver had just been called on the carpet. Bella Ortez was the first to speak. She said glumly, "I'm sorry to inform you that our board just had an emergency meeting. We've decided to end our association with your company." Grandma Jones was shocked. She asked Bella, "Why would you do that? We've been working together for so many years." Before Bella could say anything, Eugene Kim followed suit and said, "It looks like President Ortez is trying to spare your feelings, so she hasn't told you the real reason that we need to end our relationship with your company." Kim got straight to the point. "We have a reliable report that the Jones family's corporation has been cheated out of all its assets. To put it bluntly, we do not want to be drawn into your bankruptcy. We hope that you can see this is purely a business decision." Grandma Jones' lip quivered as she replied, "President Kim, you've gone too far. Our situation isn't as desperate as you think. Can you please reconsider?" Bella responded to this request with a directness that left no room for doubt. "I'm sorry, but we have no choice. According to our contract, we are requesting only our initial outlay of funds." As soon as she finished speaking, the rest of the group spoke up to request their capital too. They realized that the Jones family would be unable to repay them, and the discussion turned to selling off the Jones family's real estate holdings, including the mansion. The Joneses knew that they were ruined and started arguing with their former partners and clients. Suddenly, Grandma Jones slammed the table hard and shouted, "That's enough! What's the point of arguing? All that we're asking is clearly laid out in our contracts. We have no choice now that the Jones family and your corporation are now—" Bella Ortez didn't finish her sentence, but everyone understood what she meant.
Grandma Jones let out a long sigh. President Ortez, President Kim, don't worry. We will definitely reimburse you. But can you please give us a few days? After all, we've been business partners for many years, and we need some time to raise such a large sum of money. Agreed. Out of respect for you, Mrs. Jones, we will give you 5 days. After saying this, Bella turned around and walked towards the door. Before leaving, President Kim added, Mrs. Jones, doesn't your granddaughter's husband know Mitchell Cook and Adriana Wright? Perhaps you can ask them for help. Remember, if we don't see our money in 5 days, there will be serious consequences for all of you. After they had all left, Grandma Jones sat back in her chair and rubbed her temples. How could they raise over $50 million in just 5 days? At the same time, they were also trying to track down the $100 million that had been stolen by Oliver's friend. It didn't look good. Not to mention the fact that they had no idea if Mitchell Cook and President Wright would even agree to help them. Even though they obviously had great respect for Kevin, it was impossible for Grandma Jones to ask them for help. That's when someone suggested, why don't we ask Kevin to approach Mr. Cook and President Wright for us? This seemed to be their only solution, but nobody knew if it would even be possible. They certainly weren't on good terms with Kevin right now, to say the least. As they were discussing their limited options, a striking-looking man in a dark suit walked in. The man slowly walked to the middle of the room and said, I'd like to speak with Mrs. Victoria Jones. I'm Mrs. Jones. May I ask who you are? Grandma asked with a slight frown. She didn't recognize the man, so she was fairly certain that he wasn't someone who was currently doing business with the Jones family. The man replied in a friendly tone of voice. My name is Tyler Dawn. I'm the CEO of the KWTD Corporation. As soon as he finished speaking, the room became filled with an excited buzz of conversation. This was a shocking development. Everyone in the entire country had heard of the KWTD Corporation. They also knew that the company president, Tyler Dawn, rarely showed his face in public. He was a very private man. Grandma Jones was stunned. She had never expected to meet such a famous business tycoon, especially right here in the Jones mansion. Tyler was unimpressed by their reaction. The Jones family didn't have the best reputation in Chicago, but he trusted Kevin, so he continued to be pleasant to them. If his friend hadn't asked him this favor, he was pretty sure he wouldn't even be talking to Grandma Jones. Mr. Dawn, what brings you here today? Grandma Jones asked nervously. While they were talking, some of Tyler's assistants walked in and one of them brought over an empty chair for him to sit in. Tyler sat down and casually explained, Grandma Jones, I hope you don't mind if I call you that. Please don't be nervous. I came here to discuss a joint venture that should be profitable for all of us. Everyone became excited when they heard him say this. Mr. Dawn, how do we fit into your plans? Grandma Jones was starting to get a little short of breath. With the help of the KWTD Corporation, the Jones family would be able to easily pull out of this crisis, and she wouldn't be forced to ask Kevin for help. It's very simple. I know that you currently have no available funds, so I'm prepared to invest $300 million to set up an import-export company in Chicago, Tyler explained. As soon as he finished saying this, everyone looked at him enthusiastically. What are your conditions, Mr. Dawn? Grandma Jones asked him somberly. Except for the fiasco with Oliver's investment, she wasn't usually very trusting. This sounded too good to be true. The conditions are actually very simple. All you would have to do is handle the day-to-day activities of the company. In exchange, I only want 60% of the Jones family shares, Tyler said casually. You know that you're in a dire situation. $300 million would not only pay off your debt, but put you in a position to expand your family's business. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. Grandma Jones thought long and hard before answering. Mr. Dawn, you understand the situation perfectly. However, don't you think that the conditions are a bit extreme? Grandma Jones, you know very well that the family's assets are worth $300 million, Tyler said very seriously. This is a very fair offer. If you can't accept my conditions, then I'll move on. I'm sure there are people in Chicago who would be willing to sign on with KWTD.
Without waiting for Grandma Jones to speak, Tyler continued. To be honest, I could easily walk away from this deal. I run a business, not a charity. You have 3 minutes to consider my offer. Everyone in the room turned and stared at Grandma Jones. They all knew that without this opportunity, they would be finished. Grandma Jones gritted her teeth and replied hesitantly, All right, Mr. Don, I agree to your conditions. Suddenly, the room broke into lively debate. Some of them were against it. They knew Tyler was taking advantage of them, but they also knew that they were facing liquidation and bankruptcy. If they didn't jump at this offer, it would just go to someone else. Stop, Grandma Jones shouted. I've decided. The discussion is closed. A wise decision, Tyler said. I'll have my attorneys draw up the contract and arrange for the transfer of funds. Tyler walked out, followed by his assistants. 20 minutes later, while riding in his limousine, Tyler read through the contract and financial plan on his laptop. Then he pulled out his phone and called Kevin. Kevin, everything's been set up according to your instructions. $300 million for 60% of the shares in the Jones Family's Corporation, he reported coolly. Thank you, Tyler. I hope this goes well for you, Kevin replied calmly. If you don't have anything else, I won't take up any more of your time. After saying this, Tyler hung up the phone. Kevin took a moment to think about what he had just done. He put his phone in his pocket and headed for the exit. Just as he walked out of the Whistler Hotel, a black car pulled up in front of him. 2 men dressed in black suits quickly got out of the car and called to him. Mr. Williams, our employer would like to meet with you. Dominic Archer? Kevin raised his eyebrows and asked. Please come with us. The men in black didn't answer Kevin's question. They opened the rear door of their limousine and gestured for him to get in. Kevin shrugged and got into the car. As they drove along, Kevin thought back on a question he'd asked Cook just last night. He was wondering how Dominic Archer compared to Drake. As it turned out, most of Drake's strength came from having Cook's support. However, Dominic Archer was different. He relied on his own strength. So Drake and Dominic were pretty much equal. Half an hour later, they arrived at a luxurious mansion. When Kevin entered the foyer, he saw Dominic stretched out on a sofa in the library. Glad you could make it, Dominic said as he glanced at Kevin. Mr. Archer, I don't understand why you've called me here so early in the morning, Kevin asked candidly. I know I can be a little headstrong, but in our family we know how to repay kindness. You really helped my sister yesterday, so I'd like to give you something. Dominic Archer stood up and motioned for one of his aides to place a box in front of Kevin. Yesterday at President Wright's party, my sister and I could tell that you're interested in the miraculous benefits of herbal medicine. Dominic walked over to Kevin and opened the box. He said, We have connections with a research lab that is developing some very powerful herbal ingredients. I believe that you'll find the contents of this box extremely helpful. Really? Kevin replied. He was surprised at this turn of events. Then I guess I should say thank you, Kevin said quietly. Dominic Archer waved his hand and said, No need to thank me. I'm just returning the favor. Kevin looked in the box for a few seconds and then said, I would never have expected the two of us to have something in common. But he couldn't help wondering what else Dominic may want from him.